Interesting. All right. Here we go. Hi. This is Adam.
Good afternoon, this is DeRito.
Hi. This is Nick. You're supposed to talk at 12.
Hey, Nick, how are you? How you doing?
Doing all right. So I was kind of curious. What prompted you to reach out?
So I was actually doing some case research stuff for the things that we're doing on my side, and I always try to stay up on current events. I'm actually working with some DC lobbyist groups and a couple of nonprofit agencies on the next phase of my lawsuit. And for some reason, you came up on my Google searches, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I know Eric. I know Eric's story, and I just was interested. So I listened to the podcast on YouTube, and I was listening to it, and I could tell there was a lot of things during Eric's conversation with you that he was missing out on. And I think it's because Eric doesn't have a broader context of what's been happening to him.
Uh-huh.
I've been doing this longer than Eric. So Eric was the class of 2012. I was the class of 2010.
Okay.
And I actually started working as an informant before a confidential source, as it was called back then.
Real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Do you mind if I record this conversation in case I decide to publish it, or just for posterity research or whatever, just in the future in case
Yeah,
I
please do that.
look back into it? Okay.
That's fine.
And then the other thing was, what I had meant by, well, what exactly led to you doing, I'm not exactly sure what I guess you're doing research like Eric is, or trying to get back to reinstatement, but I thought, are you not currently reinstated?
So I like I said, I have an interesting story. So I am currently still serving in the military, but I'm enlisted, and I'm serving in the Army. And I don't know how much background you know on my case, or how much, if you went to my website or anything like that.
No, I haven't.
But the Air Force. Okay, that's fair.
But I'm wondering, so what sort of events? Let's start from the beginning. What led to, I don't know, you even, having to reach out to lobbyists in the first place or whatever? Like, what led to all this anyway?
You mean my work as a confidential source, or contacting you?
I'm not familiar with your story at all, but if you were a
Sure.
confidential informant, let's just start like how that all got rolling.
Easy. So, from my experience, there are two ways that the Air Force Office of Special Investigations recruits confidential sources.
Uh-huh.
One is they recruit based upon a person's morality. They think that this is a person that will go against the system, and they use that person's own judgment against them to convince them to work for them under false pretenses, which is what happened to me. The second type is a person who may have gotten in a little bit of trouble and is looking for a way to compensate for that, and then they use the offer of possible punishment or the offer of making things go away. And Eric was involved in some different things at the academy than I was, and I believe that's one of the reasons how he was recruited. So how I was recruited as an undercover informant is pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the Air Force Academy, and I was on a dating website, and this was 2008. So this is before smartphones or anything else. I mean, Facebook was in its infancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at 19 years old, I'm on some dating website, and I'm talking to this person, and they tell me they're 19 and blah, blah, blah. And to be fair, we never talked on the phone. We never met in person. It was simply just us chatting online through email.
Mm-hmm.
6 months later, I get called in by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Now, I had not talked to this woman in several weeks or maybe 1 or 2 months at the time. I mean, it's online dating. It's pretty cutthroat and dry.
Right.
And they call me and they say, well, did you know that the person you were talking to was under the age of 18? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even know who this person is. So I took their word for it, and I believed them of everything that they were saying. And they said, well, you didn't know. You didn't do anything bad, you know. However, would you like to work for us? So they brought me in under this pretense of I thought I had done something wrong. And then they offered to say, hey, why don't you come work for us? You seem like a pretty good guy. You seem like an honorable person.
Mm-hmm.
You were a firefighter at EMT back home before you even joined the Air Force. So you're always trying to help people and do the right thing, which was true. I was a firefighter in EMT in New Jersey before I had come to the academy. I was also at the point of my career in the Air Force where I had committed to my 5-year service commitment, but I no longer desired to serve in the Air Force. I was on the cross-commission path to the United States Marine Corps at that time. That was my point of going to the academy and finishing off. Mm-hmm. So they knew that, one, I didn't have a lot of loyalty to Air Force people at the time, and they used basically my morality to use me as an informant. So how it started was they were having a large problem at the academy with cadets stealing prescription drugs at the time. So basically, there's a lot of jump injuries at the academy from our jump program. So you'd have cadets who would get issued different various narcotics or opioids, and there was a group of cadets at the time who were going into cadet rooms and stealing these opioids and trying to sell them on the open market in the Colorado Springs. So that's how it started.
Oh.
And yeah, so it seemed pretty harmless. And to be fair, I had worked with police before as an EMT and a firefighter. So I was dumb and naive at 19 years old, but I was comfortable working with law enforcement at the time in a positive sense. Like I knew how to recognize, different things because, as an EMT, you learn how to recognize when people are overdosing or, where drugs are hidden in people's cars and things like that. So it was pretty basic and pretty harmless at the time. Now, where that changed was my roommate at the time was going to the Fort Collins Marathon, which is about 2 hours north of the academy. And he asked if I would drive them up there and participate, which I did. So we were going to a college party that evening in Colorado State University, and I was handed a drink at the party, and I was roofied. So I was roofied at this party in Colorado State, and everybody left me there. I blacked out, and I had no idea where I was when I woke up, and my phone was dead, and I had no idea where my car was. It was at that time, and I won't go into details, but I had realized that I had been sexually assaulted. And I went back to the...
Wait, so do you think somebody was intentionally trying to roofie you? Because generally it works like, somebody's trying to roofie a girl. Like, do you think you drank a roofie drink by mistake, or do you think it was intentional?
No, I believe it was intentional because I was sexually assaulted by a female. And ironically, it's actually much more common than people think, especially for academy people. This actually does happen to a lot of military men. They do get roofied by civilian females. This woman actually ended up stalking me for several weeks after. It's on my podcast that I talk about it pretty in depth if you're ever interested in the details. But basically what happened to it in reality, which is the issue we deal with in the military now, is I filed an unrestricted report, and my OSI handlers at the time, and you might remember this name might be familiar, Michael Munson, who was also Eric Thomas's handler, right, became involved in the case.
So your handler was Michael, I just referred to him as Special Agent Munson, but your handler was Munson?
Yep. He was the same exact handler, which is one of the reasons how Eric and I are connected.
And
so I know who
And what were the years that you were attending the academy?
So I started in 2006 and technically graduated in 2010, and I was a confidential source from late 2008 until 2010. So about 18 months.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just continue. I was just wondering. You keep going.
Yeah, and for timeline-wise, after I was removed from the academy, Eric Thomas continued on the cases I was working on. We didn't know about each other at the time, if that makes sense, which is intentional, right? Confidential sources don't know who each other are. But Agent Munson recruited Eric Thomas after I was discharged from the academy. He started his work in 2010, and I left the academy in June of 2010, 30 days after graduation. So there was that summer break period, and then once the fall semester started again, Agent Munson had recruited Eric Thomas at the time and had continued working on the Jameel Cooks case, which is a public court-martial case. That was the person I was directly involved in. So, I'll tag back to how that got involved. So when I was sexually assaulted and I reported it, and my commander didn't believe me, even though I filed all the paperwork and I did the unrestricted report, I filed all my channels. OSI believed me, and they're like, hey, you know, you've been doing a good job for us, and we think that, you know, this confidential source stuff is going to change. We really want you to start working on sexual assault at the academy. So that's when my role changed from, like, you know, drugs and, you know, the stupid shit that cadets do to sexual assault and harassment and stuff like that, if that makes sense.
I got you.
So I actually, that summer, my junior summer going into my senior year, I left and went to Marine Officer Candidate School, and I graduated. So I was officially a certified Marine officer technically. All I had to do was finish my degree at the academy, and I was cross-commissioned to the Marines. So I came back to finish.
So you were attending the academy, and then I must have missed something. You departed from the academy, and then you went to the Marines? Is that right?
Yeah, so you are offered, so if you want to cross-commission to a different service branch, right, you have to follow their protocols. The Marine Corps requires that if you want to be a Marine officer, even if you go to an academy, you must go to Marine Officer Candidate School for the Marines. So I opted out of my summer training periods, my June summer, going into my senior year, and so we have 3 summer periods. We have 3 3-week periods over the summer. So I decided to take 2 3-week periods, so 6 weeks, to go to Quantico, Virginia, and opt out of my Air Force training in order to attend Marine Officer Candidate School. So I came back to the academy with 1 3-week period left, and I had to be cadre for basic training at the prep school, if that makes sense. So I graduated a commissioning source already, and was just basically coming back to the Air Force Academy to finish off my last 2 semesters as a cadet, and then get my undergraduate degree. That's all I had to do to be commissioned. I didn't even need the academy as a commissioning source anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what happened was at the prep school there was a big sexual assault scandal, and I did not know how deep this was going to go. And this is, I think, something that was definitely missing from your interview with Eric. Was I don't think Eric understood how deep what he was getting involved in was, and to be fair, I didn't understand it until several years later either. So, Jameel Cooks, we'll just use them as an example because it's the most public information. It's something I can definitely 100% prove. I reported Jameel Cooks for sexual assault and harassment in September of 2009. So I was a cadre member at the preparatory school over the summer when I came back from Marine OCS, and it was reported to me by several preparatory school candidates that this kid had basically was at a party and had roofied women and was sexually assaulting them and harassing them. So he was reported officially in 2009. So when I reported that to OSI, and all the intelligence gathering I did was very simple. Email, text messages. I had a separate email address for OSI with a different name, and then we'd put everything through a VPN so the 10th Communications Squadron at the Air Force Academy couldn't track it, because the big leadership part of the Air Force isn't supposed to know what OSI is doing, because if they do, then it kind of defeats the point of having confidential sources and OSI. The purpose of OSI is to hold the chain of command accountable. But I don't even think, and this is to be fair to Michael Munson and OSI, I don't think that OSI understood how powerful Michael Gould was and how deep-rooted this problem was. Yeah, so this is an interesting factoid that I found out in 2014 and 15, and you can look this up and verify it yourself. So I technically graduated the Air Force Academy. So during my investigations, they couldn't prove anything, but when big leadership found out, including my commander and Michael Gould, they tried to give me an Article 15 for fraternization for investigating and talking to these lower-ranking cadets. And to be fair, the cadet ranking system actually means nothing in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's completely arbitrary, and it's like Harry Potter points, to be honest. Now, to be fair, I didn't know at the time, and I just took everything for granted with a grain of salt. They said, all right, here's your Article 15 for fraternization. You can't prove or disprove what happened to you, and that's the whole point of an Article 15. It's not an actual charge. It's you are accepting non-judicial punishment. I should have just requested trial by court-martial because they couldn't prove anything because it didn't happen. But anyway, OSI said, take the Article 15, admit to fraternization, sign this document with the word yes. We'll stick up for you. The worst thing you're going to get is late graduation. You'll stay 30 days after graduation, and then you'll just go on to the Marine Corps. Now, at 22 years old, when you just want to get the hell out of there, I didn't know my rights. I didn't have a lawyer. They sat me in an interrogation room for 8 hours and convinced me to sign the word yes on this pre-written confession for fraternization, which I agreed to, which is really dumb. But like I said, hindsight's 20/20. So I signed this form for fraternization, and I agreed to that on the condition that I was going to get late graduation. Graduation day comes, 3 hours before I'm supposed to walk. They said, you're not walking. And then they make me stay additional 30 days on active duty after graduation. So I was just waiting to go to the Marine Corps. And then at the last minute, on June 26th, so exactly 30 days after graduation, Michael Gould changes his mind and says, I'm withholding your commission and your degree. Get the hell off of my base. And that's how my career at the Air Force Academy ended. And to get back to your point, at the time, I did not understand why they were doing this to me and why it was so important and why they were so cruel in how they handled this. Now, what I came to understand, which is the big part that I was missing from Eric's story that I don't think he understands yet either, there is something called the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and its founding documents were started in June of 2010, the exact month that I was discharged. Now, general officers cannot start private companies or nonprofits that they would gain financial benefit from while they are serving, if that makes sense. Okay?
Can you repeat that?
So general officers or officers in the U.S. military in general cannot start a private business or a nonprofit that would generate private revenue to themselves while they are serving in uniform. Does that make sense?
General, you mean like officers in general? Anybody who's a commissioned officer can't sign it, or like you mean like higher ranking officers can't start a business?
General officers, so like major general, brigadier general, lieutenant general, commanding generals of a base or an entity.
Officer with the title of general in their name cannot start a private company. Basically.
Yeah. Exactly. They can't because there's a conflict of interest with the U.S. government, right? If they are earning revenue as a base commander and
it's kind of like a president, like when Trump was, I remember when Trump was like running for president, like it was like when he's president, you know, he can't have his fingers in his own company because that would be like, I don't know.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, conflict of interest. So. But
that is exactly the case with this.
Do you know when and so this started in June 2010? You said, right? And that Michael Gould, was he in USAFA at that time? Was he superintendent in 2010?
Yes. So General Gould was on his way out the door, and this is where it gets very interesting with the current superintendent at the Air Force Academy, who was Lieutenant General Richard Clark. Okay? So, and I have the statistic. If you actually find me on Instagram, Adam DeRito, I have this posted on the top of my feed, all the highlights from General Gould and all the statistics from this, because I've been collecting data on this for over a decade. The highest rates ever recorded of sexual assault at the Air Force Academy were between 2008 and 2010. And then continuing on into Eric Thomas's years of 2000 to 2012, and then ending in 2013. General Michael Gould served at the Air Force Academy from 2008 basically to 2013, so that 5-year span. During that 5-year span was the highest rates of sexual assault ever recorded at the United States Air Force Academy officially.
Mm-hmm.
General Clark was brought in 2010, right after I left, as the commandant, so the 1-star, right? Now, the interesting thing about General Gould and General Clark is that they're both football alumni.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets dirty. The Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation was presented to the Secretary of the Air Force, who at the time was Norman Schwartz, or the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So Michael Gould was basically starting this company, and he had to get permission from the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force's office to start this company so that he had a job to put himself into on the civilian side when he retired in 2013. So it took a couple years for the paperwork to get processed. The paperwork was initially initiated in 2010. Sexual assault was on the rise and going crazy, and then especially with the OSI stuff going on at the time, General Gould knew that if any of the information from my investigations from 2008 to 2010 or the continued cases from 2010 to 2013 or 12 with Eric Thomas continued, it would look bad on him. He would be held accountable. The Air Force Athletic Academy, the Air Force Athletic Association would not exist, and it would come down on him. So General Gould got rid of me in 2010. He got rid of Eric Thomas in 2012. And to show the evidence of this, Jameel Cooks went on and continued to rape several more women after September of 2009. Why? Because he was the football player. Jameel Cooks, Claxton, and all the friends that you've heard about from Eric Thomas, when they started at the prep school in 2010 or 2009 when I was cadre over there, these kids were recruited specifically to play football.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, all of their friends, they just kept going. The academy let them go get away with it. Troy Calhoun, who is the football coach at the Air Force Academy, is the highest DOD paid civilian in the United States at over $850,000 a year of compensation. And where does half of that money come from? Half of the money comes from the foundation that General Gould started, the Air Force Athletic Academy Association. Athletic Corporation.
So like a nonprofit just to get money or something?
Now you're seeing it. The Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation is officially registered as a nonprofit that does not have to disclose who its donors are.
Mm-hmm.
Its donors, although it's very hard to officially find who these people are, if you go on their website, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and this is where the money comes in, and this is why it was so important to get rid of me or subsequently get rid of Eric and throw OSI under the bus. There are DOD contractors providing millions of dollars through the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation shell company to the football program at the Air Force Academy, and subsequently nonprofit so-called salaries being paid to those board members. Just until recently, Michael Gould, so in 2013 when Michael Gould retired, and he had gotten rid of OSI, right? So if you look at the chart on my Instagram, sexual assaults were on the rise, and football wins were slowly going down because these kids were under investigation. They couldn't play. They didn't meet NCAA eligibility, all these other things, right? Magically, when General Gould and their final season in 2012, right, up to the OSI being disbanded, their final record was 2 wins and 10 losses. When OSI was completely disbanded and the investigation stopped, sexual assault reports drastically dropped off, and then football wins went to 10 wins and 2 losses for the year. General Michael Gould then, on his retirement, appointed himself to the NCAA Rocky Mountain West Football Playoff Selection Committee.
Yeah.
Michael Gould hasn't played football. Michael Gould has not played football or coached football since 1976. How the hell would he get that position? Well, I'll tell you what. Michael Gould gets on to the NCAA playoff selection committee and gets the Air Force Academy into the Idaho Potato Bowl, which we've never qualified for in the existence of the Air Force Academy. Millions of dollars are now funneled into the academy through the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation from donors and sponsors that have never been disclosed publicly. General Gould then quits the NCAA thing within 8 months after having an official civilian job on retirement, and is now appointed as board member of the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and its coffers are full of money, and he's paying himself a hefty six-figure-year salary. And on top of that, he's compensating Troy Calhoun over $400,000 a year from the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation to fund his additional DOD salary, which makes him the highest paid private civilian in the Department of Defense. And ever since then, it's basically, to make it really simple, the Air Force Academy football team is a rape factory. They let these kids come in from disadvantaged areas, and it's a rape factory.
A rape
That's all it is. Yeah,
Okay.
because here's the thing. These kids don't get prosecuted and go to prison. They get caught sexually assaulting people, and this is still going on right now. I have interviewed cadets at the Air Force Academy on my podcast who are there now. The culture has not changed. They are just better at hiding it. No, especially with this COVID thing, locking these kids down. There are still kids on the football team who everyone hates the football team at the academy, but it's not talked about because it's the giant moneymaker for the academy. And these kids are still committing sexual assault and harassment. They're not meeting the grade. They're not even supposed to be at the academy. They're not smart enough to be there. They don't even want to be officers. They are strictly recruited to play football. I mean, you know this. What the hell is going to entice a person who is actually Division I qualified to play football? Why wouldn't they just want to go to Texas A&M or go to LSU? Why the hell would they want to go to the Air Force Academy? It makes no sense because these kids don't want to serve in the military. Most of them definitely don't. Okay. Well, they kind of lead them with a carrot stick, saying, well, you know, you can qualify for the professionals because, to be fair, there's a kid from my class. His name is Ben Garland. He now plays for the San Francisco 49ers. Mm-hmm. Well, he's one in tens of thousands who made it to the pros from the Air Force Academy, right? But they give these uneducated, poor kids who are recruited from poor areas who are very good at sports the idea of, well, you can come to the academy or West Point or Annapolis or Air Force, and if you're good enough, you can go play for the pros and totally skirt your service commitment, right? But when they come to the Air Force Academy and they realize they're not going to go to the pros and then they're stuck there, they think they're above the law. And they have these parties and they're on the football team, so they're never going to get in trouble. They're never held accountable. I mean, you can look up the transcripts of Troy Calhoun when he's asked about the cadets who were caught trafficking cocaine, and he just pretends that like that didn't happen. Troy Calhoun and General Gould have been complicit in hiding hundreds of sexual assaults and rapes at the academy over the past decade since I was there. And it's all about the money. And this is the part of the story that I think was missing from Eric's story was I don't think Eric understood the entirety of what was going on because it took me 10 years to uncover this stuff with documents and statistics and talking to people and interviewing people because, let's be honest, I'm not important. I am one cadet who is going to the Marine Corps. Why would the Air Force Academy put so much effort into silencing me? It doesn't make any sense until you figure out that it's about exposing a giant money laundering scheme for the Air Force Academy athletic programs in order to protect rapists, in order to get donations to fund themselves.
That doesn't sound like money laundering, in my opinion. It sounds like it's incentivized. That's a different thing. Like
sure. Although, okay, so I apologize. That was a little bit of an exaggeration, but they're basically taking money from contractors, which is illegal, putting it into the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and then utilizing that money to pay off coaches and people like General Gould who sit on these boards. It's a way for the generals to pay themselves a nice, fat six-figure-year salary after they retire when they have no actual qualifications or experience. General Gould just got appointed in 2020 to be the CEO of the Association of Graduates. So he left the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and now is the CEO for the Association of Graduates. But guess where the Association of Graduates accepts a large portion of its donations? The Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a giant circle jerk of money being passed behind closed doors through the football team and these private entities in order for general officers at the academy to sit on a nice retirement at the expense of hundreds, maybe even thousands over the years of cadets being sexually assaulted and raped.
And is there any evidence of this, as far as like, you know, you can just maybe public records or anything like that you know of?
So getting public records on the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation is nearly impossible and very difficult to do. So what I have done over the years is I have actually compiled as much public information as I possibly can, and I can email that to you tonight when I'm at work, of the revenue generated by the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation since it was officially stamped as certified as a nonprofit in 2013, basically until almost now. They haven't published any recent numbers in the past year or two. You will see an exponential increase in the money that it's obtained, and they have no listing for its sources. It's amazing. It's amazing how they went from generating no money to over $30 million a year, and nobody knows where this money is going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to be fair, West Point and Annapolis also have very similar programs to this. This is not just an Air Force Academy issue. This is a service academy-wide issue.
Okay. And is it, as far as you know, transpire in similar events as far as they have some sort of nonprofit athletic corporation set up, or something analogous to that?
That's exactly what it is. They have different names. I know the Air Force Academy is called the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation. I know West Point and Annapolis, it's like, I don't know, the Golden Knight Club Association or something to that bullshit effect. But I've talked to West Point and Annapolis people over the years, and it's the same exact situation. It is a way for service academies to funnel millions of dollars that are not tracked or accounted for into the academies, because as a federal service academy, they can't accept private donations or whatever else from the general public because they're a federally funded service academy. Our tax dollars pay for those schools to exist. Right. So they can't take any additional monies. So the way they funnel it to the football team is through private nonprofit groups that are run by retired generals and admirals of those respective service academies.
And I think
it's a giant.
Well, that's where like my logic sort of, you know, hits the wall. If it's a federally, you know, funded academy or whatever, school, public, you know, federal, whatever, and they're not allowed to accept private donations, how is it that a guy like Calhoun, you know, from what you said, gets this sort of money? Like where is the door? Where is the back door where this money is, you know, being dropped into and given to Calhoun or whoever? You know, like where is this?
Well,
his money getting
his paychecks are public.
Okay.
You know what I mean? The Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation posts that it gives $425,000 a year to Troy Calhoun for his coaching, and the DOD gives him another $425,000. So collectively, he's making $850,000 a year to coach a mediocre football team.
Right, I get that, but how is it that you know, he gets paid by the DOD and the academy, both federal institutions, but where is that money coming from as far as the nonprofit private sector like the Air Force Athletic, whatever it is? How does that money get from to here, you know, from point A to point B?
Right. So the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation doesn't have to report its donors, but its donors, if you look on the bottom of their website, the sponsors of their website, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, USAA, all the big corporations that work for contracts in the Air Force. So You know, it is very hard to find these documents if you can find them at all. But I mean, it's sleight of hand. You got to understand, Colorado Springs is a massive contracting area for the Air Force. You have Peterson Air Force Base, Schriever Air Force Base, Buckley, the Air Force Academy at Fort Carson, and Space Command is registered out here. Do you know the billions and billions of dollars that are worth in the Springs to these general private contractors?
Oh,
so
I live here. I see it all the time. Like, I don't think the money's being well spent. People like just buy souped up street racing cars because they don't know what to spend the money on because they can't smoke weed.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, it's kind of like a you scratch your back, I'll scratch mine. Who doesn't support the Air Force Academy? You're not patriotic. Hey, Raytheon just made an anonymous donation of X amount of millions of dollars to the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and they're tied directly to the engineering program at USAFA, which grants contracts to Space Command in the Springs. That's how it works.
But why not just?
You know what I mean?
But why not just? But why go through all that trouble of funneling into the Air Force Athletic Shell Corporation? Why not just donate directly if it's already public? Then that doesn't make sense.
Because these contractors, it is for contractors who are trying to obtain contracts for work to the U.S. military, it is illegal for them to give money to any government entity. You can't do that because then they're trying to get favoritism, to win a satellite contract or an ICBM software contract. So the way they get away with it is they funnel it to the Air Force Academy Corporation, which does not have to disclose its donors at all, and it comes as a charitable contribution on their end, which they write off on their taxes, and then the Air Force gets all this money paid to its generals and retired generals to the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, and then the Air Force Academy, with all their 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, and colonels, help do the contract selecting. Because you got to understand, the Air Force Academy is a big place where Space Command does a lot of their research on stuff, So if the Air Force Academy Research Lab comes up with this, hey, Lockheed Martin has this great piece of technology we've tested and improved, and this should be utilized for the next Air Force, and the AFWERX, which is one of the general contracting agencies the Air Force uses to grant contracts for taxpayer dollars to government contractor groups. Hey, the research is here. The numbers look good. This component of metallurgy for the satellite is going to work, and that's how it gets granted. So basically, these government contractors, without having to disclose it, they funnel money to the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation. The Air Force Academy then kind of nods and gives the okay to AFWERX to grant certain contracts to these government agencies or these general contractors for the government, and the circle just keeps going round and round and round. I mean, the amount of billions of dollars we waste in wasted government contracting fees is insane.
Okay. Well, why don't you send me that information that you have, and I'll take a look at. And let's get back to your story. So you're working at OSI, and Munson's your special agent, and let's leave off there. So go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. So from there, they basically had me sign a form saying I admitted to fraternization, that I was going to walk after 30 days of graduation, and basically 30 days graduation, after graduation comes, and then General Gould changes his mind and rescinds that. So they basically threw me on the street. They withheld my degree, they withheld my commission, and they basically said, fuck you, and there's nothing you can do about it because you don't have any money and you can't hire an attorney. Okay, that was true. So from 2010 to 2012, I found a job as a personal trainer, and I lived with my sponsor family, my Air Force Academy sponsor family in Parker, Colorado, because I couldn't even afford to go home. So they let me live in their basement basically for 2 years and get back on my feet. So I started working in the civilian world, and then I met my current attorney, Matthew Gripey, who is a constitutional lawyer here in Denver. He actually just won police battery case in Aurora. So he's kind of a big deal. And then I have Herb Rubenstein in New York, and he was actually one of my instructors in my master's program, which I'll get to later. But I actually went back to school. I just took student loans out, and I finished. I only needed to take like 12 or 15 hours of classes to qualify for civilian undergrad because I had 156 credit hours from the academy that mostly transferred, right? So I finished an undergrad degree. I technically didn't even need the academy anymore. And since I finished Marine Officer Candidate School, I should have been able just to commission right there. I talked to the Marines, and they said, well, your discharge paperwork, I have a general discharge under honorable conditions. It's not a bad discharge. The only thing that differentiates me from a full honorable discharge is I don't qualify for VA benefits or the GI Bill. That's it, right?
Okay.
But the Marines were like, well, your paperwork is signed by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Like, you actually have to go above that to get back into the military, and we're not touching that, which I don't blame them, right? So I'm like, well, I'm screwed. I'm never going to get back in the military. I don't know what to do. So I got really lucky, and I found a job working in the oil and gas industry. And I actually started working in frac and then drilling and wire, and then I became an engineer on a wireline crew. I went back to school, finished my master's degree, so I specialized in oil and gas and environmental sciences and engineering. And I found my passion. I mean, this is what I've been doing ever since, and I now work at the Denver refinery here as an environmental wastewater technician. So, but it provided me the income that I needed to hire a competent legal team. And I hired these, Herb and Matt, and we actually start finding all the constitutional violations. No due process of rights. They didn't, they out-processed me out of the military incorrectly. And we filed for the Air Force Board of Corrections military records, like back in 2014, right? And obviously it was denied, because we were just going on the evidence we had at the time.
Can you pause a second?
Yep.
So I'm kind of seeing the picture, but I think you're a few steps ahead of me. I'm a little bit behind. Why are you going through all this trouble to hire attorneys in the first place? Maybe I missed that.
Well, I want my reputation and my degree back. You know what I mean? The Air Force Academy took my dignity and my honor from me, and they've been lying about me for over a decade. And I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to knowing what's right and what's wrong. And I know what they did to me was wrong. Now, I didn't know the inner workings of what they were doing to me until later on, but I knew that I was wrong, and the evidence was in my favor at the time, which I believed was, even with just the OSI stuff. And I'm like, what you guys did was wrong, and I want my degree and I want my commission back, which you withheld. Because to be fair, Eric Thomas did not finish finals and did not graduate. Right? I finished my degree and I went through graduation, and I was on active duty for 30 days after graduation. Right? So that is the one big difference between Eric and I, which, to be fair, I think they learned their lesson with me. They kicked Eric out so he didn't have a claim to be reinstated with any of his stuff because he never finished.
Yeah, from what I understand, Gould kicked him out, I think it was 3 months prior to his graduation.
Yeah. So this really sucks for Eric, and my heart feels for him, but he doesn't have a chance in hell of getting anything given back to him because it's been 7 years, man, and he didn't finish anything. They don't owe him anything. And they didn't even make him pay back. So that was interesting about it. So they gave me a $320,000 bill on my credit report saying you owe us for your education that we're not giving you.
Yeah.
So they financially destroyed me. They didn't do that to Eric because he didn't finish his degree. So there's a big difference between Eric and I when it comes to damages sought. And I'm seeking to be reinstated to have my stuff given back, which I officially completed. Eric didn't finish anything. So I think that's where we part ways on our experience, right?
Okay.
So this is where it gets interesting. I find a loophole in the Army National Guard to get back in because I'm like, if I can just get back in the military, then I don't owe them my time back and I don't have to pay them because they didn't allow me to serve enlisted. But if I can get back in enlisted at least, then I just serve my time back and then this debt goes away, right? The Colorado Army National Guard tells me there's 3 conditions to let me in. 1, I have to go in enlisted as an E4 even though I have a master's degree, which is hilarious. 2, I have to recomplete basic training because I have had over a 5-year break in service at the time, right? So I had left in 2010, so it's 2015 now, so they need me to go back to basic training. Okay, fine, I agreed to that. And the 3rd condition was I had to serve in a special operations unit and a forward support company role in order to prove myself that I wasn't what the academy said I was. Fine. So I agreed to be a parachute rigger in the United States Army Special Operations Command in the National Guard, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So 2 years goes by, I'm still working my oil field job on the side. I'm working the National Guard, my couple weekends a month or whatever it is. And 2017 rolls around, and I'm qualified to get my commission back. The Army's like, well, you proved everything else wrong. It's time for you to get your life back. Just move on past the academy. You already have a degree. You have a master's degree. You can commission now. No problem. You don't even need to fight the academy anymore. And I agreed. I'm like, tally ho, let's do this. I get offered a slot to go fly Apaches in Utah. I actually quit my job. I was getting ready to leave for Fort Rucker to start helicopter training. And I get to the final med station check. And they say I am not allowed to accept my orders and become a warrant officer to go fly because there are several major psychological conditions listed on my medical records from the Air Force Academy, which are debilitating and say I'm basically mentally retarded and non-functioning. I'm a schizophrenic, all these crazy disorders, which I posted all those records online. And here's the interesting thing. I've been in Army Special Operations Command for 2 years at the time. I went through MEPS and basic training, and none of this stuff ever came up. Right. But magically it populates when I go to apply to be a commissioned officer again. The Air Force Academy knows that if I commission, I win my case, and I have disproved them wrong. So,
what do you mean
here's the interesting
your case? What does that mean? Because I'm not too familiar with all the technical nuances of military.
Yeah, so I would win my Air Force. I would win one of my, because I applied for the board again. I would win my board argument, the Air Force Board of Corrections and Military Records, where they stated I was unfit to be an officer and I wasn't qualified and I was a scumbag from the academy, which is what the Air Force Academy says, right? But I'm serving in Air Force Army Special Operations, and I became a commissioned officer. So you guys have been putting on this show for X amount of years for no reason, and we've proved you wrong. I want my degree reinstated from the academy, right? And that was, and they know that. They know if I ever become a commissioned officer again, it's not going to look good on the Air Force Academy because why have they been fighting so hard to stop this? Why won't they just let it go? Well, obviously we know about the money and everything else, but these general officers and these people who oppose me in my case do not want to be exposed. Because if this story gets out about what they did and all the falsified documents they created and all these fake testimonies about how much of a horrible person I was, it's not going to go well for them because it looks bad on one of our federal service academies, right? Like, why are these officers putting this much effort into ruining these people's lives? So
you had records of all that, of all the stuff that they said?
All the medical records and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I posted all publicly on AdamDeRito.com. All the records are posted publicly online.
Okay.
Because I'm very, very transparent about my case. I have nothing to hide. So, and here's the very interesting part, which is why my federal lawsuit now is so important. So, to be fair, and this also kind of aligns with Eric's stuff, nobody gives a shit about Air Force OSI. Nobody cares about he said, she said, stuff you can't prove, military disciplinary systems, like nobody cares. And to be fair, I would never win my Air Force Board of Corrections solely on that case, right? I tried the first time on my first and second and third board I applied, because this is the 7th time I'm going to the Air Force Board of Corrections and Military Records, right? 7th time. Right. And, Eric's in for a long ride. He hasn't even gone to his first one yet, and but unfortunately it's just money and attorneys, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And that's how they try to stop you, is they just run you out of money and make you want to commit suicide and you just go away. But now we had a different level of evidence, and this is the important part. If you look on my medical records, there's something very interesting on there. I was discharged in June of 2010. My medical records were changed and created in September of 2011 when I was a civilian. Why is the military So my medical records that have all these mental health diagnoses on them, right? Yeah. They are dated in 2011 when I was a civilian.
Well, you sort of graduated before that, right?
Well, I left. I was off active duty. I was discharged from the military in June of 2010. Why is the Air Force Academy in possession of any of my records? That's a HIPAA violation. And why are they modifying and changing records without seeing a doctor or anything a year later?
Okay. Yeah, that's weird.
Come to find out, so then we come to find this out, is that Jameel Cooks and all those kids involved in Eric Thomas's investigations and stuff, what time frame was that? 2011, 2012, right?
Yeah.
So what my lawyers believe they did is that the Air Force Academy tried to delegitimize all my investigative work with Agent Munson and OSI by making it seem like I was crazy, and that evidence against Jameel Cooks and all these other people that committed sexual assault, that evidence cannot be presented in their court-martial cases.
Okay.
And that's how they got off. That's how all those football players got off except Jameel Cooks and Claxton. Like, out of the 30 people I investigated, only 2 of them ever got punished, and they didn't even serve any prison time. And then Jameel Cooks ended up playing at Alcorn State University and still getting scouted for, like, the Green Bay Packers or something like that. Like, he was a convicted sex offender in the Air Force and still ended up trying to go play professional football, right? Yeah. So that's what we believe. That's what we believe happened. We believe that the Air Force Academy tried to make it look like I was crazy to delegitimize any evidence that might have been presented in court-martial behind my back and without us ever knowing. But, I mean, besides that fact, the Air Force Academy falsified my medical records. That's illegal. I never saw this doctor. I have no idea who she is. She stated she saw me at Fort Carson when I was stationed at the Air Force Academy. I don't know who Kristen Henley Price is. There's no documentation, no session notes, no nothing to back any of this up.
Yeah.
You can't diagnose anybody with any psychological disorder in less than 3 sessions. You have to take all these tests and everything else.
So let's pause this. So that all was dated, right? It was dated, yep. And do you know what
black and white?
Do you know what day of and month it was in 2011 that medical record was dated?
Yeah, September or something like that. September 2011.
And where?
It's like I said.
And where were you in September 2011?
I was working as a personal trainer, attending UC Denver.
Okay.
I was not in the military. So why does the military have my medical records? They should not have those in their possession. That's a HIPAA law violation.
It'd be interesting if you could look up with, like some sort of receipt from like Walmart or something saying that you were here at this time when, ever they like.
Well, I can't prove that I was not at Fort Carson, I guess, if that makes sense. But I was a civilian. I didn't have a CAT card, and I was working a civilian job. Does that make sense? Like, I was out of I have my discharge paperwork. You know what I mean? Like, my discharge paperwork says you're out of the military in 2010. Yeah. I mean, it's indisputable. Like, they have no control or jurisdiction over me when I'm a civilian. So
even if they had like a sign-in sheet, like I'm sure there's like a public sign-in sheet with the front gates. I don't know if
there's nothing.
Keep those on record, but it'd be interesting.
They've been unable to produce any evidence of that ever.
Right.
Which is interesting, right? So our big argument is this now in the federal courts. I'm never going to be able to prove the LSI stuff. He said, she said. You talk to Eric. They don't even recognize him as a confidential source, right? They lost his paperwork, and all this stuff has gone missing. They play the same game with me. That's fine. You know what I mean? They're going to do whatever they can to cover. However, the one thing they can't get away with is the fact that I have black and white medical records with names, dates, and timestamps of them falsifying my medical records, which is a felony. So we filed a lawsuit against them, and we basically said this. Well, you falsified my medical records, which prevented me from commissioning in the United States Army. This isn't even about the academy anymore at this point. This is about you preventing me from seeking employment as a commissioned officer and preventing income and causing me damages since 2017 by preventing me from commissioning by falsifying my medical records. So this is a constitutional argument, my right to privacy, HIPAA laws, due process, all of these things. And since I was not in the military at the time, they cannot use the Ferris Doctrine as an excuse to dismiss the case.
what's the Ferris?
which is what the military. So the Ferris Doctrine is basically saying you can't sue the military for medical malpractice, to be as blunt and simple as possible, right?
Okay.
However, I was not active duty at the time, nor was I in the military in 2011 when these records were created. So now the big constitutional argument, which is why DeRito versus USA is so important, is, does the military have jurisdiction over civilians? Our argument is no, they do not. The military does not have the right to violate the constitutional and privacy, laws of its citizens, even if they're veterans, for personal gain, right? And this is why my case is that, and I think any normal, logical American would agree with that makes sense. The military should not have jurisdiction over civilians and its veterans, nor anyone's medical records when they are not serving in the military, right?
Yeah.
Because it has drastic effects on people. These assholes have actually tried to fight this argument. I can't make this up. So the first level of my case was dismissed. It's not out of the court system. It just has to be reworded, and this is the argument we're fighting now in the 10th District Court of Appeals. So the case has not been dismissed officially out of the system, but Chief Justice Bremer of the 10th District Court came back in 2020 and stated this: there is no law or rule written currently in the U.S. Title Code that states the military cannot falsify a civilian's medical records. So since there is no law currently on that, we are not going to rule on the way this matter is worded at this time, right? Which is a big lawyerese way of saying, we know you're right, but we can't say officially you're right without you rewording this. So the Air Force Academy, in its idiocy, thought they won, which they didn't, because then the FOIA request I had put in 2017 to have all my other records released was given to me. And on the bottom of those records, which you can see online, I'm listed as a major. They never apparently even tried to kick me out of the military, and everything was completely fucking made up. Because I would be a major right now if I had stayed on active duty, right? So they have all these fake medical records where I'm still listed as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Air Force, and I'm in the Army, in the National Guard as an E4, and I was separated. So where are all these fake medical records coming from, right? So the 10th District Court mandates mediation, which is unheard of. A mediation between a Federal Service Academy and a former cadet. We go to mediation, and we sit there and say, we have the evidence. You're not going to win in court if this goes to a jury trial. So here's our conditions. I want my degree back. I want my commission back. And I want to be back paid for all the monetary damages you have caused me since then. And they say no. And they say, I'm like, all right, how about just degree, commission, and correct my medical records? No. How about commission and medical records? No. How about medical records? No. They refuse to negotiate on any terms. And this is in June of 2020, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started going more public. I went on Andy Stump's podcast. I started this Dark Saber project and everything else. I'm like, well, the only way to get people on board with this is to disseminate public information about my case. So that caused a little bit of a stir on Andy Stump's podcast and with this Dark Saber project, where I'm interviewing cadets who are telling me they've been raped and sexually assaulted in real time. So the Air Force Academy files a motion again to have the case dismissed. And we're like, well, that's interesting. Why are you doing that? Well, they said, well, you already won your case. We don't know why you're still suing us. We're like, what are you talking about? I can't make this up, man. They produced another medical record, which is also posted on my website, that says I won my Air Force Board of Corrections of Military Records, which doesn't happen. And it's dated September of 2019, a year before we even went to mediation in the lawsuit. They've been withholding this information. So it's only one of two cases. Either one, they withheld this information for over a year and didn't disclose it, or that document is also made up. I'm going to go with they withheld this information.
Yeah.
So we basically accused them, you mediated in bad faith. I won my Air Force Board of Corrections and Military Records. They even said that all those false diagnoses had to be removed from my record because there was no evidence to substantiate it. And they withheld that from the federal court system. They withheld that evidence from the federal judge. And that really pissed off 10th District Court. So now what they did was, and this is the point I'm at now, they went in and they corrected some of the things that they were mandated to. They were given a direct order to correct my records, right, and remove all false information. But they didn't. They actually kept a few things on there, like arbitrary test scores that they can't produce any test evaluations on. My GAF score, for example, Global Assessment of Functioning, which basically lists me as mentally retarded on my medical records in the Air Force, and which still prevents me from commissioning. So the Air Force Academy now has said, well, you won your board and we corrected the information we were told to correct, but you never said that we couldn't falsify additional information in your record, basically, and if you want those corrected, you have to drop your lawsuit and go back and refile with the Air Force Board of Corrections and Military Records again, which is a 3-year process, and another wasted $50,000 of legal fees. And basically that's how they get you, because they say, well, the statute of limitations on corrections and medical records is 6 years. Well, I filed my first board in 2017. I won my board in 2019, didn't find out about it until 2020, and now they want me to go through another board, and that'll take till 2023, which is when statute of limitations goes up. And I basically go, well, I won my case and I'm right, but we don't owe you anything. Fuck off.
Okay.
So the interesting thing, we're at 10th District Court of Appeals right now, and our argument is the case must be remanded back to 10th District Court because the judge does, in fact, need to rule on this because there is evidence in my favor that the Air Force has been withholding. The Air Force's argument back is this, and I can't make this up, man. He hates Asians. He's a misogynist. He's a pedophile, and also he has no relevant standing in the military. That's the Air Force's argument in 10th District Court of Appeals. So we're waiting on a decision now. So now they're just going after my character. They're just trying to character assassinate me to shut me up, and it's not working out well for them. I mean, I'm an open book, and everything about my life is online. I have nothing to hide. And they're trying to use the way that I was so-called recruited for OSI, when I was talking to someone who I didn't know who they were, as a reason for why everything about my case is illegitimate. And to be fair, I also hired a PR person and a private investigator, and they actually went and tried to find any evidence of, was there any investigation with Colorado Springs Police Department and OSI where it was found that I was talking to somebody who I didn't know was underage online, and there's no evidence that any of that even happened.
Oh, so
there's no record of me in Colorado.
They're walking back all the way to, like, a dating thing? They're walking it back all the way to that?
Yeah, they're trying to use that as a reason for why I should lose my case now, which is hilarious. They're just trying to go after character assassination. But we've been in contact with Colorado Springs Police Department, and there's no record of Adam DeRito talking to anybody underage online, because if that was the case, I should have been arrested, right? So once again, my lawyers have speculated that they made up that entire thing, and it was just a way for them to recruit me to work for OSI, and I didn't know any better at the time at 19 years old, right? I mean, it makes sense to me. So, but I mean, irregardless, that has really nothing to do with the case, but I just find it hilarious that the Air Force has used that as their sticking point in the case, as their main argument, when I have all of the paper evidence that they falsified my records and retaliated against me for reporting sexual assault. So I reported sexual assault on the football team. I reported my own sexual assault, and I was taken out of the Air Force Academy, and all that stuff and information was hidden from the general public to protect the football team and the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation. That's really what it comes down to. It's just all about protecting their money and using survivors of sexual assault as a way of trying to silence them. So, I mean, I'm the only person in Academy history to do this. So.
And if I wanted to find out more information about the Air Force Athletic Corporation, as far as, I don't know, I really wouldn't even know where to begin as far as documents, whatever is concerned. Where would you suggest I looking?
So, like I said, it's very hard to find a lot of the public filing stuff. So, one, I will send you a lot of the Excel file that I've been constructing with all their income that I can find on public record and stuff, right? I will send that to you tonight when I get to work because it's on my work computer. And then also I will send you a few websites where, I mean, you could just look up Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation on Google and their bullshit website comes up, right? But that should give you an open tier to current members of the board. And then, I mean, basically what it comes down to is, you know, if we ever so they're trying to keep this out of federal court because they know they're going to lose. If we go to federal court in front of a jury, they're going to lose. Like, it's no question about it. They're trying to find every way to stop us from getting into court. Because that's when we can subpoena individual financial records of, like, General Michael Gould, right? Like, we can subpoena that information. And if we ever subpoenaed that information, it would not go well for him.
Would they not fall under a FOIA request? You have to subpoena them?
Well, because he's a private citizen now.
Oh.
That's the problem. Michael Gould's been a private citizen since 2013. So his military stuff's public, but he retired in 2013. All the stuff that's been going on, I mean, it's been going on since 2008, but I mean,
what about
a private citizen?
You couldn't put a FOIA request in for, like, Air Force Academy donors or anything?
Nope, because it's a private entity and it's not run by the government, and they don't have to publicly disclose anything.
Not for the Air Force Athletic Academy thing, or the Michael Gould Corporation. No, but for the actual Air Force Academy, you couldn't put in a FOIA request for.
Oh no, that's easy. Here's the thing: you can do a FOIA request, and actually, that information about the expenditures of federal tax dollars on the football team is public information posted on the Air Force Academy websites. But they don't have to tell you where all the other donated money came from. So because it comes from the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation.
So what you're telling me is they can say they have this amount of money, but they can't tell you where they got this amount of money from, is what you're saying? Because it was donated by a 501(c), which has undisclosed donors. They could say, we have a donation of $20 million from a private entity, but they don't have to disclose where the source of those donors are, which is the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation. Right? Okay. I mean, it's smart. Don't get me wrong. It's genius. I mean, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I can't blame you guys. You guys have really thought this through. Yeah. But I don't know. It just seems like the Air Force Academy is the only game in town when it comes to, you know, using military aircrafts to get contracts. I mean, the Air Force is the only game in town when it comes to that stuff. Like, we're the richest. Well, especially what? Well, yeah. I mean, out here in Colorado, you have to understand the Air Force Academy is. Sorry. The Air Force Academy. Why go through all this trouble? That's what I'm confused about. Like, if they're the only game in town, why go through all this effort to schmooze and, you know, wine and dine, so to speak, to seal the deal? You know, like, why not? Like, well, it's like you just said, though. The Air Force and the 3 Air Force bases in the Springs, and Fort Carson, that's the entire economy of southern Colorado, right? And the problem, though, is that all these retired officers, they want to keep making this type of money in the civilian world, and the only way they can do that is to cup the balls of general contractors and work for them. I mean, like, look, man, you can look up any retired superintendent or commandant from the Air Force Academy now. Go on their LinkedIn. Look at what jobs they're sitting in now. It's all bullshit fucking contractor jobs. It's a giant circle jerk. I mean, General Silveria, you know, is now a president and CEO of, like, this educational fund. And General Cox is one of the leading consultants for Boeing aircraft. I'm like, you were a shitty general. Like, you're not. So it's just a giant circle jerk of, I serve in the military for X amount of years. I keep the contract money flowing. I get out. I'm guaranteed a job, which pays me another hefty 6 figures a year. And as long as I just play nice with the Air Force, we just keep the money flowing, and we just keep filling our bank accounts off of taxpayer dollars. It's really what it comes down to. Yeah. So it's a massive levels of financial corruption, the amount of money we waste on contractors and general contractors and consultants who are military veterans who run some of our major, you know, military institutions and military bases. But I mean, that's how DC is, man. That's just how it is. Yeah, well, funny because it seems like they took the playbook from politicians and how they would get their money.
That's exactly it.
And then the military just applied the politician playbook to their own playbook, and yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that is exactly the reason why no senator, congressman, or even the current governor, who is my commander-in-chief of the Colorado Army National Guard, will get involved in this because they're all getting paid off to protect the Air Force Academy. So why would they care about Adam DeRito and getting justice for sexual assault survivors and fixing our military when Jared Polis, who is the current governor of Colorado, sat on the Air Force Academy Board of Visitors back in 2008 and 2010 when he was serving in Congress when this was going on. You know, Cory Gardner, Michael Bennett, John Hickenlooper, Ken Buck, all my politicians in the state of Colorado, they will not touch the Air Force Academy because of the amount of financial donations that they get in support from the Air Force in the state of Colorado. There's no way in hell they're ever going to go against and bite the hand that feeds them.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I think where these things often lead is the case where, you know, they just don't give a fuck, for lack of a better word or phrase.
Well, of course, Joe Blow's not going to do anything to change them, right?
Well, what I'm saying is, you know, once they get, you know, so much money and they find that, you know, there's nobody that can really do anything to deter them from getting that money, you know, often the way these things play out is that they eventually just like, yeah, we did do that, you know, what are you going to do about it?
You hit the nail on the head right there, Nick, is because that's why my case is so important, because if I win my federal court case, it will set precedent that the military doesn't have unlimited control over civilians, and it needs to be held accountable by the legislature and its citizens that it serves. And that's why they're so afraid of my lawsuit, and they're trying to stop it, is because if I win, I mean, forget the Vanessa Guillen Act, forget the Military Justice Improvement Act. If I win my case against the Air Force Academy, it will set legal precedent that the military is under civilian control, that will be reasserted, and that they do not have control over private citizens, and they can't just do whatever the hell they want. Because that's exactly like you said. That's exactly what they're doing now.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying, you know, it ought to be the case, you know, it should be the case that they should feel some sort of shame, and they should, return to some state of like morality and justice. But what I'm saying is, what is the case, that what I see happens in these kind of things is that instead of like going back to feeling some sort of shame, or, you know, establishing justice, you know, maybe in the form of, you know, reinstating you, paying you back whatever, sexual assault. It's often the case like, yeah, we did that shit. What are you gonna do about it? That's what often I see is the case, not what ought to be the case. You see what I mean? There's a distinction there.
No, you're right. I agree. I think I misunderstood you at first, but I think we're in agreement, though, is you're right. Who is going to tell them what to do? Because no one's going to hold them accountable, and what are you going to do about it? They're just going to keep doing whatever they want.
Well, even if people are held accountable, I still think there's a good to fair chance they'll just be like, yeah, you know, we did this anyway, and we're the fucking biggest game in town. What are you going to do? Like,
I agree. Until some of these people start going to prison and start getting held accountable, I mean, they're not going to change their tune. They're just going to continue to take advantage of cadets and future officers and all this corruption and wasted taxpayer money. You're 100% right, Nick. 100%.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, it sounds like if you want to stop here, that's fine. If you want to reconnect again, that's fine. We can set up a time to talk in the future if you'd like.
Yeah, sure, man. I mean, you just let me know whenever you want to talk. I'm glad to help shed light on these issues and help people understand their inner workings of their military academies, because it does have a massive effect on on our country. It really does. And people don't understand, like, these academy grads, they end up being CEOs and running these companies, and then, you know, the plot thickens, so to speak, right? I mean, these guys are running banks and engineering firms and everything else, and next thing you know, we're in another 20-year unnecessary war at the expense of academy grads who suck at their job. That's what it comes down to. Well, so I appreciate the phone call, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, it's all good. What I'd like in the future, you know, this is kind of a shotgun kind of interview, like just kind of a widespread covering a lot of different topics. What I'd like to do in the future is just talk, you know, more at a leisurely pace as to, you know, the specific details and story, and generally it would be better for a general audience if they could just understand, you know, how things go as far as your situation from like a start to finish kind of approach. Like if you could like walk your story through step by step in terms of, you know, what happened at this point, what happened at that point, and because you know, there's a lot of military jargon that I understand gets thrown around a lot in general audience, and I, for the life of me, like have a hard time understanding some of the terms that get thrown around, but that's just the case of like the military community. And one of the things that me and Eric are sort of doing is, you know, we're trying to, you know, parse down and distill like elements of his story where it's understood by a general audience, where, you know,
yeah, I mean, when I listened to Eric's story, I could tell that he was having a hard time telling his story so the general public understands it. I mean, I've been trying to tell the story for years, so I think I've gotten a little bit better at it over time. I mean, I could still improve. We could all improve continuously, but you know, the one thing I'll tell you is, to be fair, I don't think Eric Thomas likes me very much anymore. I have tried helping Eric in the past, and I warned him several years ago that he needed to start his Air Force Board of Corrections and Military Records sooner rather than later, because it's going to take him years. And he hasn't even filed his first one yet. And I mean, to be fair, I'm back serving in the military. I've made a lot of progress. I moved on with my life. You know, this academy thing I now do is an advocacy thing, right? Like, I work with a lot of people in D.C. on these topics, and, you know, I'm actually trying to make real institutional change. And Eric is still trying to get a little bit of his dignity back, you know, and I feel really bad for Eric because it's been 7 years and nothing's really changed in this case. You know what I mean? And I think from what I've heard through other channels, is I think Eric is bitter with me because of some of the progress that I've made that he's been unable to accomplish. And, you know, I don't want there to be a misconception where if you talk to him about me or if you mention my name, because he'll probably come out violently and say, oh, I hate that guy, he's a liar, and blah, 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 blah. You know, it's just not the case. I have nothing against Eric. I wish him the best. I've always extended my hand to help him with the resources that I have. But I understand, like, what he went through was extremely traumatic, just like it was traumatic for me. But he's going to have a very, very hard time with his case getting any type of reconciliation because he doesn't have anything to stand on. Like, he never went back and tried to serve in the military. I mean, to be fair, Eric could have gotten back into the military if he really wanted to, the way I did. You know what I mean? Like, if he really wanted to serve in the National Guard or something like that, he could have done it. He just never did. So, and I'm not questioning his patriotism or willingness to serve. I'm just saying, like, I think he's one of those guys where he has sat back and said, well, I just want people to fix things for me. You know, feel bad for me. Here's my story. I want you to fix things for me. And I'm like, no one's going to fix anything for you, dude. You're all on your own. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to advocate for yourself and provide the evidence. And don't get me wrong, Eric's got evidence, man. I've seen it. When him and I were working on some things years ago, before, like, to be fair, I have not heard from Eric in probably over a year. I got him on one of my friends' podcasts, the Bad Mom podcast, and that was the last time I heard from him. But since then, I've just heard through the rumor mill that he's been very bitter with me about my advocacy work and what I'm doing, because I'm pushing this beyond myself. I understand there's a very real possibility that my case never gets resolved, right? I mean, I could lose. I could lose in federal court, and that's a very big possibility. But the difference is I'm not going to piss, moan, and cry about it. I'm going to get my commission back in the Army eventually. I'll find some way to do it. I'm going to keep fighting for all these people who come to me who have been sexually assaulted and retaliated against, and I'm going to fight for them in D.C. and try to change the law and work with Congress and other means. You know, this has gotten bigger than myself, and I'm very fortunate and grateful of the people I've connected with over the past 10 years in this case. You know, I tried to invite Eric to be part of that advocacy movement. He just seemed, at the time, to be fair, very uninterested in doing that and more or less just trying to help himself first, which I understand. It's a fight or flight mode, you know what I mean? But I think he has a hard time accepting that. I mean, there's a very large possibility that nothing ever gets resolved in his case.
Yeah.
And I just feel bad for him. And I don't think he's accepted that yet.
A legitimate word.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he hasn't even filed his. And to be fair, he also has never been able to hire a competent legal team to help him with this process because it's extremely expensive, Nick. I mean, I've spent over the past 10 years, I'd say close to $300,000 in attorney's fees. You know, Eric was working at a GNC when he got kicked out of the academy, and he couldn't afford that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
And Eric sought help from Protect Our Defenders, and they're the most useless fucking nonprofit group I've ever tried to work with. I mean, they're all a bunch of scam artists.
So you.
But the thing is, I know that. Oh, they're scam artists. They're scumbags. And Eric has no fucking chance with those people.
Because I've tried. Well, I was trying to work with them as far as distributing the story, and I worked with one of their people, their media coordinators. His name's Brian. I'll leave his last name out, but he was. I think his wife worked for the Obama administration, and I think I'm wondering if there's like some sort of conflict of interest as far as, you know, actually pursuing some resolve in the in like, I guess, the ethos that they like claim to, as far as, you know, actually protecting their defenders. So I don't know.
They don't.
I haven't done too much background in it.
I know a lot about the inner workings of Protect Our Defenders because I've been on the DC circuit with this stuff. They're just full of shit. All they want to do is collect money in their nonprofit. That's it. Don Christensen is kind of a piece of shit. He's their main guy who always tries to talk in DC, and his name is on the documents of some of the cases I worked on where he didn't convict people when he was an Air Force JAG. And I called him out on it. I actually emailed him. I'm like, hey, Don, how come your name is on these documents of those and you let these people go scot-free at the academy?
Yeah.
You know? And, like, no response. You know what I mean? And I've worked with many people in D.C. on this, and Protect Our Defenders is not a popular group because the only thing they care about is generating money for their nonprofit, paying themselves. And, I mean, their main cause is, we're going to try to take the military justice system out of the hands of military commanders, right? That's their main argument. And I'm like, well, if you support my case, we can create legal precedent on it and don't even have to pass a bill. But Eric, I've reached out to Protect. I initially reached out to Protect Our Defenders in 2013, right? They want, and you know, what helps Eric is that he's African American. I'll give him that, right? But other than that, he's not a gay, trans, lesbian, transgender person, so that doesn't fit a narrative for them to assist people. Okay. I mean, it's very much. It sucks, man, but I'm a straight, boring white dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I have all the evidence.
Do you think it's a game of identity politics as far as?
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. But the problem with Eric is that, you know, Eric was involved in some dumb, shady shit at the academy, man. That's the difference between him and I. Like, I mostly did internet trolling and IP addresses and emails and text messages, and that's how I obtained intelligence for LSI. Eric did go to these parties, and Eric did get in trouble, if that makes sense, right? I mean, I made some dumb mistakes as a cadet too, but like Eric was at these parties, man. Like he's even said it himself publicly. Like they were teaching me how to roll joints. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, why did you even agree to that? I mean, I think, although I was dumb and retarded when I was 19, even I would have said, if I'm trying to be an officer, the last thing I'm going to do is touch drugs at the academy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where him and I differ, and I think that's why he gets bitter with me sometimes, is because I have made a tremendous amount of progress in my case. I have a large support-based following. I have the evidence. I have a website. I have a podcast. I try to talk to people and American citizens like yourself to explain why our military are so corrupt and what we can do to try to improve that, whether it's through legislation or advocacy. And Eric is still just trying to tread water and keep his head above surface with trying to do his first appeal, which is going to go nowhere. You know, and
I think the BCMR like turnover rate as far as like validating your case, from what Eric told me, was very low, like something of like 6% actually.
It is. And here's like I said before, Nick, I've been to the BCMR 7 times, and I finally just won my last one in the past 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Eric hasn't even done his. He has no chance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. And I feel bad for him, and I think that's what discourages him, which is why over time I've tried to encourage Eric of, hey man, you may not be able to win your case, and but if you really want to serve, man, then go serve. But he backs away when I mention that. I'm like, dude,
if you could give Eric some advice, or maybe even you don't even say Eric, like you can word it however you want, just at people who've been in similar situations, how would you recommend they resolve their situation the best?
Yeah. So my 2 recommendations are this. One, if you have the evidence and you can, I say violently, prove that you're innocent and that you have the documentation to back it up,
mm-hmm. then
you have my full support. Let's go. Let's ride the lightning. I'll find you some lawyers. I'll help you write your BCMR complaints and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't do that, if there is no, like, dude, I have audio recordings of Agent Munson that I used our own wiretaps against them, those idiots. I'm saving those for federal court. Oh yeah, dude, I have Agent Munson on wire saying, because their biggest argument is, oh, you never worked with us on investigations, right? Oh, you were just a witness. You were never a confidential source, right?
Right.
Like, that's what they tell Eric. I have him on wire. Did I help in numerous investigations? Yes, you did. Damn, got him. But I'm saving that for federal court. That's one of my aces in the holes, right?
Okay.
Like, yeah. I was dumb back then, but I wasn't that stupid. And so what I'm trying to do is like you said, for Eric, is if you are truly dedicated to serving, and this is what you want to do, then you need to prove it. I went back to basic training, and I'm serving in the Army. Prove them wrong. Prove them wrong through your own moral character, right? And that's the one thing I don't think Eric has done for himself is they are going to come after your character. They're going to ruin you publicly. They're going to say horrible things about you. And the best thing and the best ammunition you can do against them is prove them wrong. Go back and serve. Go back and finish your college degree. Speak out. Be an advocate. Be honest about your mistakes and move forward. If you're constantly looking in the rearview mirror all the time, you're never going to be able to move forward. And you're going to have to get to a certain point in your life where you have to accept that I may not be able to change my things in the past that happened to me at the academy or whatever other part of the military, but I can 100% change where I'm driving to right now. And I think Eric just hasn't gotten to that point yet. Like, I've gotten to the point, to be honest, where if my case never gets resolved and I never get justice for my personal case at the academy, I'm okay with that. I have a life. I mean, I micro farm out here. I have chickens. I still have activities I like to participate in and go skiing, and I have a beautiful wife and a dog, and I have an amazing civilian job that I've built a career on with my additional education that I've received outside of the academy. And that's the best defense I had against the academy. Prove them wrong. You know what I mean? And Eric just hasn't gotten to that point yet. And I've been trying to coach him for years on that, and he basically tells me to fuck off now. I'm like, dude, go out and finish a degree. Go out and find a career. Find something that you love.